Good afternoon, everybody. This is Stijn Grove, and we're welcome to the Kickstart panel with Jason King from and Mark Macarazzi. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. I will start with a quick introduction, and Jason, could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, appreciate that. So my name is Jason King. I'm the director of data centers for Robusys. And I oversee the data center operations for Robusys globally. We're a systems integrator, do any kind of controls, automation type work like that in the data center industry.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Mark.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I can't see you. Hopefully you can see me. Yes, Mark Macarazzi. I'm Vice President of Data Center Infrastructure for Europe and for a company called Legrand. And in Legrand, I'm running the Legrand Data Center Solutions business. I've been in the industry 25 years. Legrand itself, we're in 5 continents, 90 countries, and operate in about 180 countries. So we're a global organization, and the Legrand Data Center part is very focused on the data center infrastructure in the gray space and the white space. I'm very happy to be here.
Good. Jason, over to you. How has 2021 for you been, and professionally? And I hope it was also personally a good year. But how has it been? Can you start off with that?
Yeah, great segue there. So 2020 was an interesting year for everybody, as everybody's keenly aware at this stage. We started off very strong. We had a whole bunch of backlog getting into it. And what we found out pretty quickly once the COVID pandemic really set in was the hyperscale projects that we were working on shut down or drastically cut back. And it was interesting in that it was a little weird, because you would expect the industry to ramp up production, considering everything was going digital. Everyone started working from home. Workers just spent a lot more time online with meetings, and people just watching a lot more shows at the house. All that goes back to a data center. So it was a little odd that we were all feeling that out in real time, and that what we would expect to happen didn't happen. It was the reverse of that. So that's how it kind of kicked off. I think that was most of the market kind of saw that in general. And then we just kind of felt it out throughout the rest of the year, right? So as the companies and data center owners kind of got a little more comfortable with what they were looking at in terms of capacity needs, they started to reevaluate their businesses and restructure things to get to a place where they could ramp production back up on the construction side. So it was a rough year, but we did get through it. We didn't have any major issues at the Robusys side, so that was a good thing. Mark, how'd your 2020 go from a nutshell?
So it started out like any other year, right? Jan and February. Like yourself, there was a lot of projects. I mean, the hyperscalers were already growing at a rapid rate anyway. And then I remember I'd come back from San Francisco end of February, and things started to get a bit weird, right? So meetings started to get canceled. Projects that were supposed to happen started to not happen. And we very, very quickly saw that we had to change the way that we were working. First of all, having to start to work from home. But a lot of the colos and the hyperscalers started to change the way they were working. We actually went to a colo and got sent away because of of the pandemic. So it was a very difficult time right through the supply chain, definitely. And then come to around the end of Q2, things got crazy. Like new projects in countries we weren't anticipating started to come up. Actually, just overall in 2020, we doubled the amount of countries that we had to supply, and the amount that we were supplying in those countries, specifically for hyperscalers and the colo. And we found that the speed in which the hyperscalers wanted things were actually faster than they wanted it the year before, even though in in 2020, it was really difficult from a supply chain perspective. Now we have factories all over the world, right, to minimize risk and stuff. So it was okay, but it was certainly a challenge.
Yeah, I'll completely echo that. And one thing I wanted to touch on that you brought up there was the speed to market aspect of how things are going right now. So data centers for a long time have been an industry where the schedule is incredibly important. These facilities cost a lot of money. They take a lot of time to design, to construct and commission and ultimately turn over. And if you're going to spend the kind of money that it takes to spend to build these things, you don't want to just build that capacity out in hopes of needing it one day. You want to do the just-in-time philosophy for these projects. So that lends credence to, hey, the last minute possible greenlighting them, but that capacity demand is there effectively as soon as they greenlight the project from the start. So the schedule's always been tight on these types of projects, but in the past year, it's really the pressure has been increasingly been pushed down from above to push these things out quicker. How have you guys seen, how have you guys reacted to that increase in pressure on the schedule delivery?
So one of the consequences I think that occurred was, even though it was harder to meet people face to face, which is difficult in any type of industry, but very much in ours, was the relationships grew and the transparency improved in when people really needed stuff. We like to definitely be far closer to projects anyway, because of all of the reasons you mentioned. But we got even closer because of the speed in which people needed to have to go into production, right? So that definitely changed our relationships for the better. But one of the other consequences of that was working closer with the colos themselves. We actually brought them closer to our overall supply chain as well. So they understood the supply chain. I mean, if you think about it from a manufacturing perspective, as an example, we had some technology that very small components that are part of very big solutions that we do, and the factory closed. People went home, right, through lockdown. Then as lockdown eased, some of the people didn't come back. They were out in villages, and then they were going to these central cities, very dense central cities in some countries. They didn't go back. So you had a limited amount of people manufacturing, okay, so that causes a problem. Then ourselves, like a lot of other people, will use passenger airlines to fly technology. Well, there's not a lot of passenger airlines, right. So you're using these couriers, and so you've got a lot of people using the couriers. Then the couriers were prioritizing medical supplies, of course, but then you have those slowdowns. So you had all of these different things, and what we found, I think the colos found helpful from us, is this layer of transparency that we were giving, that helped them plan better with the clients, which were predominantly last year, as we saw, were hyperscalers.
And Mark, if you said in at the start of this panel that you saw some interest from unexpected countries. Could you say a little bit which countries these were?
So for us, and there's colo sites there already, but it was the hyperscalers that were going into there. So like Poland, Turkey, the Iberian region. We've got colos there. We work with those colos, but again, the size of what was going into those regions was incredibly interesting, because we have project forecasts, and we understand where the countries are. Like, for example, we expect to increase by 41% this year for hyperscalers in terms of new countries that they want very large deployments in. And you can handle a certain amount going into those countries, but looking at the volume of what they have going in was quite interesting and unexpected. And then that opens up lots of different questions around the colos. Are they ready? Can they scale? As Jason was rightly saying, are they, prepared to handle the scale and the speed in which the hyperscalers demand?
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you touched on something there before, Mark, that I want to talk about as well, which is the more open information distribution amongst partners with data center operators and owners. It's always been a secretive industry, but I will echo that. I think this past year, the industry is finally recognizing that if you want to be able to produce these things at the rate that they want, they have to have better forecasting with the partners. And I can speak from a selfish perspective with controls. We're typically low man on the totem pole. BMS systems, EPMS systems, those things they're not typically at the forefront of people's minds when the designs come out. And so typically the scopes of work get pushed to the bottom, and that leads to problems. So the more you can share information as a partner with your vendors, with your suppliers, with everybody in the chain to get these data centers produced, the better it is for everybody, because there can be better planning, it can be more efficient allocation of resources all across the board, just benefits up and down. And I hope that trend continues, but because I think it's the right one, I think it's a good one.
No, definitely. And one of my guys, his name's Vincent Lee. He's a fantastic guy, and he leads my MTDC part of my business. And he says it's all very well for someone to have global presence, but they need local excellence.
Yep.
Right? And it really coins off what we hope we can also help with the colos, so they can have their local excellence, even though they have global presence. But to maintain that, one of the things that we found, and I guess Jason, I'll ask you this, the requirement to monitor and measure the environment within the rack and outside the rack actually increased, because what was happening is they became worried because they weren't in the colos, or they were working from a distance, that they wanted to be proactive with the environment so they can not fix problems when they occur, right? But solve any potential problems to maintain the production, because they don't have people there, or they don't want as many people in the site. That's what we were seeing certainly in the rack. And I don't know, Jason, did you see any kind of evolution in terms of what people were wanting, or more people?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's always been data centers have historically not employed a lot of folks there. They're lean operations after turnover, of course. Construction employs a lot of folks. So in that regard, you need systems to be able to operate those facilities efficiently, because you just don't have the folks on the ground to actually walk around and do things all the time. You need systems to tell you what's going on, and then well-designed systems can make decisions on your behalf. So with the COVID, with the pandemics coming up, it accelerated that tremendously. So a lot of these facilities have restrictions. You're not allowed to go into work. You have to work from home. And so then you get into this situation of, well, how are we going to continue to operate these facilities with even fewer people than normal? And that's saying a lot. So the benchmarks of being able to do that, or the backbone of being able to do that, is your systems. So your BMS system, your EPMS system tell you what's going on with the electrical side of the equation, any kind of DSIM to tell you what's going on inside the rack. So those types of systems have historically been designed and operated for the old mentality of, you have limited folks on staff, but they are there to handle things. With even fewer people there, you need to rethink about how you design those systems, and that's probably going to be a trend going forward, because that it touches on the skills gap that's in the industry that everyone's well aware of in terms of the technical ability that we seems to be drying up. So you really do need systems designed to be able to handle fewer folks on site and to be able to deal with those problems when they do come up.
No, definitely. And it's funny you said the skills gap. Yeah, we call it. It's also known as the talent gap. Right?
Yeah.
As the hyperscalers are going to even more countries, have they got the talent in the region or enough talent in the region to maintain it?
Right.
As they're scaling and becoming even bigger, you need more people potentially, or you have the same guy or lady, working 24 hours instead of the normal 12 hours.
Right.
And then what if one of them over this period of time gets COVID, right?
Right.
They were talking to a very large bank in the US, and he was saying that one of the biggest challenges is the resources of people and what to do and how to move them around. Because if one person gets COVID, then you've got to check all the other people, and then they have to down tools.
That's right.
So as you're building these sites and maintaining the sites, you've got to have these types of plans. And I'm sure lots and lots of people have these plans, and maybe that's a question would be good, Stein, from the attendees. What kind of plans have they got around if someone gets COVID? What's their backup? How do they handle it? I think we really need that in the industry, maybe some specifics around that when it comes to colos themselves. But that really drives the need to be able to monitor, measure, and manage as much as possible from anywhere.
Right.
Because for me, I don't think it's working from home. It's working from somewhere with a good internet connection.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Which is why I went to Malta for 1 month last year.
They've got good internet there.
Pretty good internet. It was not bad.
So in that regard, as the facilities expand to new regions, to new areas, and the local population may not have the ability, as these facilities are turned over to construct the buildings as well as to operate them after the fact. What are some things that Legrand has been doing in the background to try to help, at least in terms of the distribution and construction of the facilities?
So I'm certainly more focused on the white space.
Yep.
Right. So that's certainly after. But one of the things that, again, I mentioned his name, Vincent Lee, actually put together was a checklist, a colo checklist that we give out to our colos, and we actually give it to the hyperscalers as well when they're going into certain sites. Like, for example, we did a test on, we did a seismic review, seismic areas of different countries that they were looking at going into. And we did that for one of them. But we put this checklist together so the colo and the cloud, the hyperscaler, could check off all of these different areas, right? And what we found was the colos were quite appreciative because they may have had 80% of the answers already and they knew those particular things, but the last 20% could be critical.
And those details matter, right?
The details matter, and they might matter at the worst possible time. Right. I mean, on one of them, there was a particular new site going up, and the customer, the hyperscaler, needed to get into the colo so they could get their production going. And one of the questions we asked was, what roads are you taking to that site? It was in a particular country, and the roads could be a bit precarious going to that particular colo site. And the reason we asked it is the hyperscaler was putting cabinets that were fully populated into the cages and so on in the colo. Well, if the roads are bumpy, the lorries that are taking the units could make the cables loose, and you may not notice it straight away as you put it in, but over time that can cause a problem. So we have, like I say, lots of different divisions that work in different parts of construction, right, of a data center within and inside and outside. So we try and pull these different types of advice, and we got and like I say, we got it together on this checklist. So that's proved helpful. We've had some positive feedback, or people grateful that we sent that off.
Yeah, no, that kind of expertise and that kind of experience in the industry is incredibly valuable for everybody involved. One thing that we've been lucky enough to to have is customers, the traditional hyperscale facilities where, these are the largest companies in the world type things where they have they're building data centers for their own personal needs, as well as to working in the colo space, which is a totally different philosophy for what you're trying to accomplish there. And we've seen an interface there increasing incredibly in the past year as well, which is hyperscalers know how to build their own data centers. They're specifically built and designed for their needs, but sometimes they can't get those things quick enough. And so a really easy way to increase capacity quickly is to partner increasingly more with the colos. So instead of smaller facility or smaller companies and smaller organizations renting out certain amounts of space in a colo, we've seen hyperscale, very large companies renting out entire floors, right, entire buildings from the colos. And so there you have that intermingling, this marriage, so to speak, of the hyperscale owners using the colos facilities, and that changes the design intent on some of these things, because if I'm just a small company and I just have a couple of racks in a colo, I'm probably not concerned about the entire building. I'm generally just concerned about my racks and making sure I have power and they don't overheat. But if I'm renting out the entire space, I have a much more increased. I'm much more worried about the entire space, and so you may need additional things to handle that kind of worry. How have you guys seen that kind of interfacing between the hyperscales and increasingly using the colos?
Well, the data tells us 80% of colo space was hyperscale last year. I think that was the statistic. And you've touched on actually quite an interesting point, really, because for us, certainly the question is, you have this huge tenant.
Yep.
You're building so much for this huge tenant, right? So how do you maintain making sure you look after that tenant? Because if that tenant goes, you have a lot of space.
Right.
In some of these countries, you have a lot of space. And we don't have an answer. It's more of the question, what do they do, right? Mm-hmm. Because that's their business model, right? We'd expect the colos to get that business in. But I've got to believe it's really challenging. And again, it would be a great response to get from any of the attendees that are colos, that they look at, the amount of hyperscale in their colos to the amount of whether it's corporates and mid-market organizations. Because what we certainly saw is that the mid-market side, whilst things were very busy for us, at the mid-market side, it was really quiet, for colos. So what is the tipping point to where you say, right, is there a tipping point for colos where they say we actually have a particular client that's actually got too much of our estate, right? Do you turn them away? Do you just carry on building? I think it's an interesting question, because also you could argue that the hyperscaler could actually absorb the colo, just buy the colo. Why not? I mean, they could do lots of things like that. And is there a tipping point? What is the critical time where someone might even make that decision? But I suppose the important part is, no one's going to turn away, I wouldn't think, any good business, profitable, right? You're going to do it. And you just have to maintain, as I mentioned, that local excellence, which is operational efficiencies, making sure you're delivering on your promise when you say you're going to do it, being adaptable, all of those things. So those are the things that are definitely important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. I did want to touch on a couple of like pieces of advice, I guess. I know you've got some as well. So I'll kind of start that off right here, which is as the year progresses, some things to think about from a couple different perspectives. From a colo provider itself, as you're going into new areas, as you're increasing capacity at existing sites, a good takeaway to have is to really put your any low voltage systems control, security, access control, all of those at an equal playing field with the mechanical and electrical portions of the projects, because all of those low voltage systems ties the entire building together. And without those working correctly, when you need it, you run into problems. So a big takeaway is to truly treat the low voltage systems as an equal of the higher profile and the larger, more expensive scopes of work. So that'd be a big one that I wanted to just kind of highlight. What's something you got there, Mark?
I would say ensuring that all of the data points that you could pull from that environment, so you can monitor it and manage it to the best that you possibly could, you need to invest in that. But also it all needs to be aligned.
Right.
Sometimes you can just get so much data, right? We all know how many data points you could get. And I'm not saying get every single one, but get the ones that would make a difference if something went up or if something went down, and make sure it's fully aligned with everything, right to what you said, right? Even the things that might seem of no consequence on a day-to-day basis. If something happens with that, how does it impact everything else, right?
Yeah,
so,
and your point there is and to make sure the infrastructure can do what you want it to do, right? So you shouldn't be buying equipment that can't do functionally what you need it to do. Like that, it seems like a simple thing, but time and time again, we walk into problems where, a facility wants their electrical equipment to do certain things, and it just can't do it because they didn't do good enough design up front to ensure that.
And do they do that because they chose not to, or they didn't know they could do it?
It's a lack of expertise in the whole platform, right? So if you just have an electrical engineer designing electrical equipment, they're going to design that electrical equipment very well. But if they don't know how that needs to integrate to their EPMS system, their electrical system, their monitoring system, that's where you run into the problems.
So, and that's common now.
Yes, unfortunate, but it is very common. Yeah.
Right. So how could we help the people that are listening today with that?
It goes back to the point we talked about before, which is better information sharing. So you should bring your vendors in as early as possible, including in the design of the facility itself. And even if it's just in a consulting role on the side, those are important. So have an actual expert of their scope involved as early as possible, so they can just flag those items, right? It's not to suggest that the vendors need to be driving the entire design, but the vendors are the experts in their specific discipline. They know the most about it. You can get valuable feedback earlier in the process that way.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly subscribe to that. And actually, one of the notes I made prior to this panel thing, when we were thinking about how we can help, it is getting that education,
right?
And I think it's an old for those of you that have been in the industry and know the ITIL proverb, which is data equals information equals knowledge, right? So you have the wisdom to make decisions. And I think in this current, not only in this current climate, but ongoing, based on the speed and demands from the hyperscalers, because of people like us who have these, right? These phones, and things like that, right? It's not going to stop. So ensure you have suppliers that are able to supply what you need when you need it and at the scale you need it, and where, right? I think it's really important to go with, let's say, very reliable, established organizations to ensure you have that business continuity for you and for your clients. So from an outlook perspective, Jason, what are you seeing this year? What are you hearing?
So what we're hearing this year is, well, the transition of power here in the States does have a global impact, which is everyone should be cognizant of these types of things, right? So with the new administration, they may change federal regulations, guidelines, all that kind of stuff. So currently, right now, what we expect is just a pause in the industry here domestically, but that pushes internationally as well, because a lot of that stuff, it's a global market, right? So what we expect is for just a short term here, a temporary pause, just to see what the new reality is going to be, to see how the administrations across the globe are going to start working together and changing things, because I think everybody expects changes. We don't know where it's going to come from, but that shouldn't take too long. And in the next couple of months, that should get resolved enough where companies feel comfortable enough to start making longer term decisions. So what we expect to happen is a slight slowdown for a little bit, which is natural. It happens anytime there's a change of administration here in the States. And then to kick back up into high gear. So we do expect a continued push for digitization of life. I mean, I think everybody understands that everything we do that's digital ultimately goes back to a data center at some point. And so data centers as a market is going to continue to be important and even grow, continue to grow. So we do expect towards the end of this year an uptick in demand, and that just leads to an uptick in construction and production as well.
Yeah.
The interface there, again, we touched on this a little bit earlier, but that's when companies really have to start making hard decisions, which is, I don't want to spend a bunch of money up front to build a facility if I don't need it. So you want to delay that decision as long as you can, while still having enough time to flip the switch on production when you actually need that capacity.
Yeah, I think that part's really important in terms of making sure you know where your supply chains are, you know who can supply, et cetera, even before it all happens, so you are ready to use your expression, flick that switch.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And
I
I know.
do wonder.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I do wonder. If I think about our business, and I guess a lot of businesses where so much of it is now done online.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about this panel session, and I was thinking, well, it probably, for the attendees, it's probably like watching a football match at home compared to going to the stadium, right? So you can see it and it's interesting, but you're missing that little buzz, right? Where it's all still important. And I think with us and with the colos, will they still have to, let's say, do business and encourage the hyperscalers to go with them online,
right?
And how much of that will they need to have visits and things like that? I do wonder when that's all going to happen, because I think we've certainly, if you think about it, I used to travel about 65% of the year,
right?
But now I can have a number of calls through the day with a number of people in different countries that I would have normally flown to. So those things would take time. But I do think that the part that has, let's say, suffered in general is getting people together and having ideas.
Yep.
Getting those ideas together. And I think when you get this buzz together, you do come up with certain, ingenious ideas. So I'm very curious to see how the colos respond to certain things where they're given new ideas and they have to get people together on how they would do it, and how people like us will respond. I do believe we have local excellence, right, in the different 90 countries.
Sure.
But it's not like being face to face.
Yeah, we've been struggling with that discussion as well, just like, just with our little world, or our little part of the world, which is, what does the future look like in terms of folks not working in the office? You need that collaboration, that in-person collaboration. So just because a job can be done from a technical perspective remotely doesn't mean that's the right way to do it. So it's definitely, it'll be interesting to see how that goes forward, because I think there's some hard questions that a lot of companies are gonna have to start answering. I think you're right.
Yeah. Well, I have two questions that I would like to ask. One is about the personnel of in the industry. Should the industry be doing more training of talent themselves, and because we're also in sort of like a talent pool which is looked at by many industries, the technical, low voltage, mid voltage area, where there's a lot of people. Sort of like other industries are also looking a lot at these people. What's your opinion on that?
Mark, you want to go first?
Sure.
Yeah.
So the quick answer is yes. We should be educating people more. We have something called the Data Center Academy, when we've got our, it obviously didn't get that many people last year, I've got to be honest, because it is definitely getting people into a room and really having those discussions, but we're releasing it again this year. But education is everything in terms of that. The part that I think is important is the talent gap of people coming into the industry. And I would certainly recommend looking at people that possess certain talents, but aren't necessarily from our industry, right? So the military, for example, military people in terms of their discipline and project management and things like that, they will have certain skills that will work very well in the data center industry. If you look at the hospitality industry, as an example, hotels and things like that, they make excellent people within the colos. Now, not at the technical level, but working with the clients and things like that. You know, we really need to think about the skills that we want, and then have a very good education plan to get them up to the particular level we want them to. But generally speaking, I think we, as manufacturers and in the industry, definitely need to educate people.
Yeah, I don't even think it's a question. I think it's an absolute yes to echo that, Mark. And I think there's two parallel paths that the industry in general has to take, just based off the timing. The first one, Mark, you just talked about this, is there are a bunch of folks that have the skills necessary to do the work that the industry desperately needs. They're just not aware that data centers as an entity is even a thing. I mean, before I came to Rovisys, I didn't know what data centers was. I didn't know it was a potential career, let alone a good one and an expanding one. So just going to other industries and just getting them information that, hey, this is a thing, this exists, you might be interested in it, because it is a nice industry. And the other one, the much harder one, is getting more folks in the pipeline at a much earlier age. So it's one thing to talk to folks that are in university, in college, to guide them towards the data center industry. But you're only working with a subset of folks that are already at least in that direction of the industry.
Yeah.
You really need to start much earlier, like all the way back in elementary school, to get folks excited about, hey, the math and science, all the technical parts that goes into these projects, the problem solving, the management that takes to get these things designed and put together. So just to get folks excited from a very young age, because otherwise, sometimes you're too late by the time you get through high school, because those people are they're just out of it, and they're down a totally different path. So I think those two things together are very important.
Definitely. There's a non-for-profit organization some of you would have heard of called the Infrastructure Masons, right? And I mean, they do scholarships for people to get into the industry. That's how strongly they see it. And the founder of iMasons, a guy called Dean Nelson, who's ex-CTO of Uber and is also from eBay, he really pushes this hard because of those things that you're saying. It's so important. And it's a great thing that they're doing with the scholarships. And Legrand is the a French chapter for them. And we do a lot around D&I, diversity and inclusion, as well. And we look at those areas to help get people more interested and aware, I should say.
And the last thing there is we as an industry need to do a better job of explaining the needs that we have to universities, so they can actually do that on our behalf. Because again, from a controls perspective, we had seen time and time again folks coming out of school with good degrees that just don't know anything about controls, because it's generally speaking not like a specific discipline. but this is across the industry, which is we need to tell the universities, hey, these are the types of things that we need folks, the skills that they need to have coming out of school, so that once they do get in our doors, we can get rolling a lot quicker.
Definitely.
Okay, thank you very much. Very good questions. Here in the Netherlands, we have sort of like been very involved in also education. I see the Masons, iMasons, have very good initiative to support that. There's a lot of initiatives also in Finland, in Ireland, in Belgium. There's actually a master study in Belgium, which is Hella, which is very interesting also. So it's popping up. I think what we also see is that everywhere in Europe there's the same challenge. So this is really an item, a topic where we can work together. So thank you for your thoughts. There was another comment that it said, by working at very much focusing on hyperscale data centers, you're really laying all your eggs in sort of like one basket. Is that not, how do you copy with sort of like the risk involved in that? Could you comment on that?
Yeah, I'll take that first. Mark. So that is a risky business move. It's a good short-term business move. If you have that ability to scale up, to focus on just one customer or two customers like that, you can accelerate your company's growth really quickly. But there's that risk at the end of the tunnel, which is what happens if they shut that faucet off, if they shut that fire hose off. Now you have a much different structural problem with your company. So this goes across the board. This goes for vendors, suppliers, subcontractors, all colos themselves, right? You need to be very conscious of that when you're making your business decisions. So you either handle that by not allowing yourself to become over leveraged with any single entity or market, or you have to have very frank upfront conversations with those folks so you can have better long-term planning. Because that may be the right decision to put all your eggs in one basket, as long as there's a plan for what that looks like over time with those folks that are coming to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a difficult decision because you've got all this potential business coming in. As I mentioned it, about 10, 15 minutes ago, you would have, as you said, like, multiple floors that are being accommodated by one client. I really think it comes down to actually contracts, because you want the business, you want to give them a high level of service, all right? And what you need to get in return is some kind of stability on how long they will be there for, right? And that's why colos will have these hyperscale contracts. And I also think the colos need to really feel strongly how big they really want to be. Because you could carry on growing and growing and growing, but you have to think, well, to your point, if that changes, could I sustain the amount of megawatts, the amount of space that I've got, and maybe be bold enough to say this is as big as we're going to get if we have this percentage of customer, right? 70% is one customer, we will only grow this big. So from a sales strategy perspective, we have to focus on the mid-market. We have to focus on more, let's say, smaller companies, and we will grow the business based on the number of customers we're getting in that part of the market, not at the hyperscale part.
Okay, very good. Well, it's been almost 45 minutes already. It's really going so automatically, and it's a very lively debate between the two of you. So, final remarks on this panel, on this subject of this panel. Jason, could you start?
Yeah, absolutely. I won't take long here. So, final remark here would be, as the industry continues to work closer together, hyperscale and colos, better information dissemination amongst all parties involved is good for everybody involved, and better thought process in the design upfront will help facilitate all those goals.
Excellent. Very powerful. Yeah.
And I think for mine, I'll keep it short and sweet. Education, right? Make sure you're as educated as possible, and make sure you have transparent relationships up and down, customer through to supplier. Super important.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. It's been a very informative panel, a very easy panel for me, because you will be talking and talking and talking. So there was a real sort of like a stream of information, which is very good. We had a couple of questions, and we're right on time already. So thank you very much. You will be also connected to the platform today and tomorrow, so people can ask you questions.
Yes.
Happy to, absolutely.
Perfect. Then I would like to thank you very much, and I hope to see all the other attendees to the following panels we still have. So thank you very much.
Great stuff. Thank you, Stein. Thanks, Jason. Thanks, everyone.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Talk to you guys later.